Welcome everybody to this new energy talk. I'm very happy to be here with all of you, with Matteo Di Castelnuovo and our distinguished speaker Alessandro Blasi. As usual, before moving to the core of this webinar, I would like to spend a few words concerning our community, starting from where we are geographically. And just one second, because my presentation is not moving. Okay, where is our network? We are more than 120,000 alumni around the world. We are split in different chapter topics and classes, and the energy and the utility team is one of the topics of the community. We are based on 4 different pillars: lifelong learning, networking, career advice, and giving. The first 2 obviously are the one that brings us together today, lifelong learning and networking, but I'm really hoping that we can add also the giving one, because it's very important investing in education. And for us, it's very important to give opportunity to people that cannot study. As you know, our webinars are free of charge, and I would be very happy if we can contribute to create a new community of alumni, a new community of speakers and policymakers, for example. So Andrea is posting in the chat a link through which you can donate now or also during next days. And we are sharing a short video concerning the giving.
Giving at Bocconi University. Why does it matter? Why does gifting to an annual fund matter to Bocconi? Because it makes a concrete impact. Your gift to an annual fund is promptly available and allows the university to meet the most urgent needs. It can ease the cost of tuition fees, support research projects, or make our campus a great place to be. Your generosity can give everyone an equal opportunity now and make the world a better place, 1 degree at a time. No matter the size of your gift, you can make a difference. Thank you for making the Bocconi experience possible. Learn more at giving.unibocconi.it. Bocconi alumni, together for a new idea of the future.
Okay, thank you, Andrea, for sharing the video. I recommend you invest in education, not only in other things. And now, as the regular followers know, this webinar is usually split in two different parts. The first one, where we like to share with you what has happened on commodity markets during the last few months, in particular since we met last time. It was late October. And so I will recap briefly in terms of prices and demand, what has happened on gas, power, and oil markets. And then during the second part, I will leave the floor to Matteo and Alessandro to get into more details of a topic. And this evening is the energy transition. So starting from the last time we saw, we can see a light. You know that the regular followers know that I like to use songs title to guide my presentation. We started with the Beatles, then we moved to U2, and also this evening the title is There Is a Light from Song of Experience album. And the idea is that the situation is very different from the last time we met, because we have seen that all the commodity complex has seen surging prices. This first chart is showing gas prices for 3 different markets, TTF representing Europe, JKM for Asian prices, and Rehab for American ones. And the three different parts in the graph represent the last 2 energy talk, and the period, the green one is the period since the last energy talk when we met. And you see that prices has increased a lot for different reasons. And we can for sure underline the fact that we have seen increase in demand after all the COVID, the pandemic, and the restriction that has been introduced last year. So we have first an increase in demand, and then we have a very peculiar situation on gas market in terms of weather. We have a very cold situation in Asia and very cold situation in Europe, and this caused a massive turn to withdrawal from storages that now are a very dangerous level. So this is mainly the first driver I would suggest to watch for future months. And for sure, what can happen is that we can have polar cold on the back of the winter, as it happened with the beast from the east some years ago. So that can cause a tightness in the market as the one that we have seen just during the last few months. For what concerns power markets, in terms of demand, the situation is positive as the gas one, meaning that we are now in a very different situation from the one at the very beginning of the pandemic, and that we get back to pre-COVID levels. And here is in the graph, you can see spot prices for Italy, Germany, and France. And it's spot, so there is a lot of volatility and variability driven by, for example, renewables and unavailability in the market. We can mention at least that starting from the 1st of January, the Italian market has a new configuration. So we have the new Calabria zone, and then also that in December last year, the market coupling between Greece and Italy has started. So this is a new configuration. The other to watch, and the other factor I would suggest are mainly related to the pandemic, both in terms of demand related to containment measure, and also concerning unavailability of power plants and maintenance, that I remember has been postponed for a COVID situation, and then can impact on prices again. And then a few words concerning oil markets. I've been very positive for gas and power demand. Oil instead is still suffering quite a lot of measures that are still in place. However, although with all this in mind, prices have been increasing in the oil market. And I would mention at least the unprecedented decision of the OPEC Plus to set production monthly with respect to what happened in the story. And there is also another drivers to watch that is concerning Saudi Arabia, that recently decided to reduce the output of 1 million in February and in March. So the situation in terms of demand is not so positive. In terms of supply, we have also the fact that Libya production has been backed after so many months. And however, the prices is not completely reflecting this kind of situation, and the Brent prices is rapidly increasing and is just below $60 per barrel. So for oil market, it's very important to understand how long the measures concerning the pandemic will be in place, and when the demand, especially related to traffic and transportation, will be back. This until the next energy talk that is not yet planned, but it will be in 3-4 months. Without further ado, this is the global situation on the market. I would like to leave the floor to our university representative Matteo Di Castelnuovo, and leave him the honor to introduce Alessandro, because I have to be very honest. I wouldn't find in English the proper adjective to introduce him. Okay, he's a friend, he's for sure a very clever, sharp mind. So it's very complicated to describe Alessandro, but I'm sure that everybody will appreciate and enjoy so much this webinar this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Thank you also for being our topic representative, for doing an excellent job as usual. And also thank you for organizing this energy talk, which have become a very useful, I would say, and pleasant opportunities for us to catch up with the latest developments in energy markets. So today we are happy and privileged to have with us Mr. Alessandro Blasi, who is currently a special advisor of the executive director of the International Energy Agency, Mr. Fatih Birol. Within IEA, Alessandro has been also the lead author of the World Energy Outlook reports, which I think all of us have consulted on a regular basis, and co-led the establishment and development of the agency's World Energy Investment Series. He's responsible also for the overall coordination of the agency's work with the private sector, and acted as Sherpa of the executive director for Davos and other international fora. Before moving to Paris, he worked for the Prime Minister's Office, World Energy Council, and the NE Group. So Alessandro, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, for taking the time to deliver your presentation, and please help us to make sense of what is happening in the energy transition. I think it's a very easy task, isn't it?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for the invitation. I hope you can hear me well. Just that I'm in Paris in the headquarters, and apparently sometimes with some network issues, so I hope this is going to be solved. And again, thanks very much for the invitation, for the kind word from you, Matteo, and from Elisa. And in the next few minutes, I will try to share a few thoughts, a few elements for discussion about a topic that is extremely broad and can be read in many different ways according to sectors, according to situation, according to region, and so on. Before that, allow me, please, and I hope you can see the presentation as well, allow me, please, just to give in 2 minutes, for those that are not familiar, what the International Energy Agency is about. The first thing is we are almost 50 years old organization that has been established as a reaction of the oil shock in the 70s, and founded by initiative of Henry Kissinger, the legendary one, US Secretary of State. Italy is a founding member, and today basically is an OECD organization that at the beginning was mainly dealing with oil issue, oil stock, oil security, but since then has evolved in many different areas. The first one is in geography terms. At the beginning, as I mentioned, we were about all the developed world, if I may say so. So North America, more or less the majority of European countries, and then Japan, Australia, Korea, and a few others. In the last few years, thanks mainly to the new leadership and the current executive director, has been established a modernization process with a sort of accession of many new countries and association of the giants from the emerging world that make IEA family to have been evolved essentially from about 40% of the global energy demand to representing 80%. So this is the first evolution. The second one is in terms of topic. As I mentioned, the IEA has been established as dealing mainly on about oil, but since then we have evolved into all fuels, all technology organization, looking at many different sectors, looking at the implication for geopolitics, geosecurity, as well as environmental, climate change, and energy access. Now, moving into the core topic of today's presentation, I think that, first of all, one point to look at is data. In IEA, we say data always win, even if sometimes tell a bitter truth, or tells or show not exactly what we would like to see. So the first point is to look where it is the global energy sector today. And to put the things in context, I think is relevant to look where it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago because the sustainable development movement is more or less dated to mid-80s, when it was established an important report done by the former Prime Minister of Norway, Madame Brundtland, about the concept of sustainable development. At that time, the global energy mix was essentially dominated by fossil fuel for about 80% of the global energy consumption, with the rest mainly in the hands of other fuels, nuclear, hydro, and so on, and few renewables. After 30 years of many discussion, many interrogation, many debates, today the share of fossil fuel hasn't changed and has remained basically around 80%, while the global energy mix has expanded by 55%. This is one thing. And Elisa, thanks for some time to give me a sign that you are listening me, because I mean, I remain in office in order to have the best connection, but it's evident I'm not lucky today. The second point is the power sector, which gets most of the attention in the debate. I mean, in my view, in a way that is not helpful sometimes, because if you look at the media, we might have the impression that we do not speak about, for instance, a clean energy transition, but we speak about clean electricity transition. And electricity is a very important part of the mix, but it's just a part of the mix. So also in this case, if we go back 25 years, more or less, and again, the date has been taken with a reason, because in 97 has been the year when we had the first important international, the very first international agreement, the Kyoto Protocol. We had more or less that the power system was distributed in 2/3 fossil fuel and 1/3 low carbon. And again, we have done a lot of things since then, many meetings, many discussions, and just a couple of years ago, the share of fossil fuel and the global electricity generation mix has remained the same. What happened is that the big increase of renewables that thanks has been developed with technology progress, cost reduction, support policy, and so on, has fundamentally eaten up shares of declining role of nuclear due to decision of many governments around the world that decided to move away. This is the starting point, and then it came more recently the worst pandemic of the modern age, COVID. Now, the pandemic is something that is having a big impact on the global energy sector because energy is fundamentally connected with economic activity, number one, and number two, because the kind of measures that has been implemented in order to try to prevent pandemic to spread even further affect sectors that are particularly energy intensive. When we look at the impact of COVID by fuel, the first thing we can see is that fossil fuel has been disproportionately affected. The coal is basically fundamentally due to renewable, less electricity demand, cheap gas, and we had a year with a significant decline for coal, which might have been much more severe if China economy wouldn't have rebounded strongly in the second half. And 50% of coal consumed in the world is only in China. All the other 50% is in the rest of the world altogether. Gas has been relatively resilient, while oil, as Lisa mentioned before, had a terrible year due to the relevance of the mobility sector in the global oil consumption. Nuclear was affected as well by the decline in electricity demand in those countries that still keep nuclear as an important share of their energy mix. And there's been only one fuel that was able to defeat COVID, and it was renewables. The only fuel that increased in 2020. Even this number should be seen with some attention, because the positive result of renewable is only power. While if you look at renewables outside the power sector, which is something that doesn't get the attention that should deserve, it declined significantly. Total energy demand in 2020 declined by 50%, which is something in the order is 7 times bigger of the decline we had in energy in 2008-9 for the financial crisis. Emission declined significantly, about 6%, but as we have said many times, there is nothing to celebrate on a decline of emissions that was driven by economic collapse and, of course, health emergency. And investment in the energy sector lost almost 20%, with the oil and gas sector that collapsed by about 1/3. And this is going to have implications for the future. Now, after this gloomy picture, let's put the things a bit in perspective and to say, is everything bad? No, there are reasons of optimism. And the reason of optimism are few ones that is important to focus on. The first one is the political momentum. We are seeing many of the world's largest economies that are scaling up. China, UK, Korea, Japan, European Union, soon, hopefully, United States with the new administration putting important and ambitious climate targets. Number one. Number two, this year is an important year in terms of international energy and climate governance, which is culminating in the Glasgow meeting of COP26, in which Italy has also the co-chairmanship with the UK. The third one is there are trillions of dollars that are injected in the system. And these are a possibility to be used to shape our economies, our energy system in a way that could put us in a different pathway. We have massive quantitative easing measures that have put ultra-low financing condition, and this is something that can help a sector, which is energy-intensive sector, which is capital-intensive sector like energy, as well as innovation, to prosper more than before. And last but not least, all this situation find more consumer awareness, more company awareness, more investor awareness to try to move towards a new energy and climate system and boost a new energy technology. Say that this, of course, the job is huge to be done. And this chart shows the level of decline we would need to go to net zero by 2070, which is less ambition than 2050, some governments speaking about, as well as different from a target that the IEA will study in details with a report, a 2050 report, net zero, that we are going to release mid-May. So the very important point that I want to emphasize here is that there is much more than the power sector. The power sector is absolutely important. Decarbonizing it is crucial for our future, but the power sector alone will not bring us to the clean energy transition we speak about that we are looking for. Number one. There are other sectors. Of course, electric cars are important. And we are seeing a very, very vivid attention towards the electrification. Elisa is telling that my connection is unstable, so maybe in 30 seconds, you're losing me for 30 seconds.
No, the connection is perfect, Alessandro.
Just to tell you, I mean. But there is a bunch of other sectors where we need to develop the technology in transport, in buildings, in industry. All these sectors, which doesn't get the attention they would deserve, are responsible for about 60% of the emission that we generate today. So the message is important to look at power, is important to look at electrification of our economy, but all this alone will not be enough. We need more. The second message that I would like to say is very important looking at what we build new that needs to be as. So I was saying something is to look at the past and something is to look at the future with the new infrastructure, but we have also to look at the existing infrastructure and the stock we have. Because we have power, and when you look at the power, today there is about 2,000 gigawatts of coal-fired power plants, most of which is in Asia and is young, that is going to run for many years to come, unless any other measure. We have thousands of plant of facilities of iron, steel, cement, chemicals that produce emission and are relatively young. And of course, we have billions of cars, for instance, in the transport. So when we look at all this infrastructure, the IEA calculated that if we make all these facilities, all these plants, all these cars run with their average lifetime, the result is that we already allocate a significant part of the budget, of the carbon budget, to a level that basically we would be already above our 1.5 degrees target to 2050. So this means that we have two jobs to do. One is to build new infrastructure that do not emit, that have a very low impact. And the other one is to retrofit certain facilities or to find mechanisms to reduce their operating lifetime in a way that is sustainable. Now, this is just to give a a very broad overview about the clean energy transition and where we are. And to put together a few points is what is happening with the pandemic is not a small thing. It's something that is not going just to vanish as soon as the pandemic will go away, but is set to leave deep scars with huge implications for many sectors, for many companies. At the same time, as we have seen, it represents through the political momentum, through the huge stimulus package, an opportunity to try to not only to build back better, but to build back differently in a way that can accelerate the pace of change. The second one is renewables are not a romantic story anymore. Wind and solar are concrete technology opportunity, cost competitive. And we are seeing them taking off and taking the lead. But we do not have to forget that changing the energy system is like to make a big, huge oil tanker to change direction. As an inertia, it takes time and is not an easy job. The third one is electricity, and electrification is important, but it's not going to be the only one solving the future. We need to look all fuels and all technology. Go to zero means we have to look at all technology to ramp up, to deploy new ones, and to find avenues to reduce emission from the current infrastructure. And last but not least, there are, can you hear me, Elisa? Sorry. Yes, sorry. And last but not least, there are many different areas to look. There is a need to involve everyone, governments, companies, citizens, investors. But at the end of the day, what we believe is going to make the difference is that we need good policies from governments in order to steer the world in the direction we need to have a truly clean energy and not a clean electricity only transition. Thank you. And again, apologize for this bumping connection.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alessandro. Elisa, please remind me how much time do we have now? We have until 7, and then we have we can start with some
questions. Until 7, you can post questions in the chat, and the chat is open to everybody, so we can read, we can see if somebody put a question and not repeat it. Okay. And okay, you I don't know about the slide now. But there is a registration of the webinar that you will have during next week, and we will share the link.
Thank you, Lisa. Elisa, if you don't mind, and Alessandro, I will give it a go. I will take advantage of my position and the microphone, and I will, Alessandro, first of all, thank you so much also in really little time to give us the overview of where we're coming from and where we're heading for and the challenges, starting from what you rightly emphasized about the fact that actually the decarbonization is not just about the power sector. Somebody could argue that power sector is becoming the low-hanging fruit, right? In terms of we know what has to be done in terms of technologies, but the rest is actually kind of worrying now, transport, industry, buildings, and etc. But wanted to ask you, with regards to the IEA also had this tracker for technology. So with regards to the energy technologies, which ones are making you somehow more optimistic with regards to the sustainable future which you depicted in your slides?
Well, I believe there are a few ones that we have to consider. If I have to pick up one that I think is critical for our future is about carbon capture, utilization, and storage. This is one that is having a sort of second birth, starting with the development of 45Q in US a couple of years ago and technology, but also is about what I was mentioning before, that the elephant in the room, one of the elephant in the room is the thousands of gigawatts of coal we have in Asia, number one, which also are very young. I mean, when you look in US and Europe, basically you have the coal-fired power plants are about 40 years old. So they are basically at the end of their operating lifetime. When you look India, China, Southeast Asia, the average age is 12 years old. And this means that unless there are ways and mechanisms to retire earlier, which of course has hundreds of billions of dollars implication, you need technologies like carbon capture and storage. This is one. I don't think it's the only one. I mean, for instance, what we are seeing is an unprecedented momentum related to hydrogen. Hydrogen as today is basically and fundamentally produced from fossil fuel. 98 to 99% of the global production comes from fossil fuel. But there is a huge momentum behind in trying to develop hydrogen from renewables through electrolyzers and so on, and try to exploit also production of renewables in the moments where maybe the electricity might not be needed. Of course, the costs are still high, but the learning by doing could help, and hydrogen also is something getting a lot of attention because looking in different application in different sectors, so not only electricity. The last point which I believe is important to mention, and again, respecting the role and the decision of each government, so is for those countries that wish to keep that technology option is nuclear. Nuclear is the second largest source in the world of low carbon electricity. Replacing nuclear with other sources is not an easy task. So for those countries that want to keep nuclear is an option that has to be respected and so
on. Thank you, Alessandro. That's very clear. And if we can stick for a second, maybe Elisa, if you don't mind me asking one more question, then we can look it up.
Please go, Matteo, don't worry. I'm trying to put some question on a slide so you can easily see them, but
thank you, Alessandro, well, actually you partially answered my question, but if you don't mind me asking again, so if we stick with technologies, no? Because if I look, well, IPCC report, if I look at the IEA World Energy Outlook Scenario 2050, etc., they're all based, you rightly mentioned the net zero emissions target, no? Because actually what people forget is not zero emissions, it's net zero emissions, which means some emissions will come out of the pipes, which means we have to take them down, basically, not capture them. And every scenario, 2050, is actually rely on a considerable amount of the so-called, well, it's whether negative emissions technologies and nature-based solutions, okay? But let's focus on negative emissions technologies. What do you think it will take? And you mentioned CCS, which is probably the most mature ones among the kind of set of technologies. What do you think it will take to speed up the commercial development of these negative emissions technology, which seem to be fundamental, right, to achieve those targets?
Yeah, I think so also, because I mean, when we, as you said, we speak of net zero emission, and you have to consider that at global level, there is a bunch of countries that you cannot put in the same basket of the most developed ones. It wouldn't be fair to treat US or Europe from an emission point of view in the same way you can consider Africa or India. Now, in terms of what is needed to develop this technology, I believe is the point is this, I mean, is what I was saying before at the last point. I mean, what we need is government policies. Mm-hmm. We have seen in certain technologies making incredible progress in learning by doing, and you can hear me now, no? Because this is the changes here.
Thank you.
In learning by doing, I mean, think about where we were with solar. 10 years ago, we have seen the cost going down by 80% in the last 8 to 9 years and so on. So what I believe is what we need is the right policies, the right incentive for this technology to prosper.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. That's very clear. I don't know, what do you think, Elisa? We have 15 minutes. Maybe we can start picking. No, so can you see? Yeah. Well, maybe we start with now the one, not the elephant in the room.
Put come together. Some has been already answered. So I mean.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe, well, maybe, oh, I don't know, if you feel like saying something about hydrogen, the solution for, well, you mentioned hydrogen, but maybe if you please help us.
Well, the starting point for us is we haven't seen basically ever such international interest agreement on hydrogen technology. This is the starting point that I would like to mention. I mean, generally you have, when you speak with several countries, as the IEA does, you have countries that I like this technology or I don't like the other. Everyone loves hydrogen as of today. So this is the very important starting point and so on. As I mentioned, hydrogen is something that is coming from fossil fuels, essentially, as of today.
Yeah.
But the hope is that the combination of development of new technology in terms of electrolyzer with the massive decline cost of renewables and the development of bigger renewables plant, for instance, the one we have, not only utility scale solar, but I'm thinking about offshore wind, which is taking place many times. The combination of this can create an hydrogen supply chain. We are seeing also big consortium in many parts of the world, starting from North Europe, to try to look as an integration from upstream to downstream of hydrogen. It's not for tomorrow. It will take time, but it's something that is promising.
Thank you, Alessandro. And indeed, those of us who have been in the business for quite some time do remember the first sort of time that hydrogen became really popular, no? Around between 2005, around that era, no? Really growing extensively and then sort of being deflated and disappearing for a zero reason. Now, hydrogen is back with a vengeance. And indeed, I can say that we at our business school, we will soon launch a new lab on energy technologies and energy markets, and hydrogen will certainly be on the top of our list of the kind of topics which we will investigate very soon. So maybe we can move on to other questions. There is maybe, well, what about the third one? What is your view on carbon taxation as a way for the industry to decarbonize? What's your take on this?
Now, the carbon, I would put in this way. The carbon tax, first of all, is something that there is in many parts of the world. I think China is launching its ETS, the sort of ETS later this year. You have things in several states of United States, you have Europe and so on. Now, very honestly, the carbon tax is something that from an economic point of view is the logic things to implement. Is academically, you put the tax that is the same for everyone around the world, and this creates a global level playing field to maximize or to optimize where to have the emission reduction in one area rather than another one. Because at the end of the day, what is important for us is that the emissions goes down regardless where they come from.
Yeah.
But honestly, we do not see a political appetite for this kind of measure. So no, the thing I was saying is I don't see the political appetite. I guess you lost me there as far as I remember. So this is one of the points that there are many measures, there are many national commitments. There is an increasing attention also of horizontal sector. So what I mean, industry in different parts, trade and so on. But I don't think that a global carbon taxation is something happening soon.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, well, maybe while we wait for more questions, maybe I have.
Yes, you can read them from the chat, Matteo, or.
Okay. Okay. This is from Alessandro. You mentioned, sorry, for Alessandro from Filippo. You mentioned a few times the role of the policymakers and how important they are. How do you see China? You mentioned the coal-fired generation Asia and USA How do you see those two countries being able to have a material impact in meeting global emission targets?
Well, I believe those two, first of all, those two countries are critical to have a global. Is number one, China, and number two in terms of global emission. So if we do not have on board China and the US, we don't go anywhere in that thing. Now, China has stated some important targets aimed at to reach carbon neutrality in 2060. What we have to see, and this will be probably something to very important, is the next 5 years plan that will set up concrete policy in China to translate its ambition into reality. But in the meantime, we have to keep in mind something which I believe is very important. China, further to using coal that has been mentioned, China is number one in nuclear soon, is number one in hydro, is number one in solar, I think is number one in wind, and is number one in electric vehicles. So China, in terms of clean technology, is not joking, is seeing this as something extremely important. And what we are seeing now is definitely with the new US administration, a renewed focus on climate change. It rejoined the Paris Agreement, as you know, one of the first executive orders from President Biden, as well as is aiming to have a low carbon electricity 100% by 2035, which is pretty close in the United States. Now, I think it's important also to recognize certain things, which is data number. The number one country that has reduced the emission over the last few years has been the US. Regardless any political preference and so on, but the penetration of renewables and the coal to gas switch in the US made that country the number one that reduced emissions. So just to say, there are policy targets which are extremely important and we will see how to implement, but then there has been also some market forces, like very cheap gas that helped a lot in that country to go down. China has a very, very efficient coal-fired power plant. We have to keep this in mind, very efficient because it's young. So I think has an average efficiency of 42, 43%, which is the highest in the world. And they are serious to reduce that, but keep in mind that this is more, how can I say, a cross contamination because the reason is air pollution rather than CO2 emission. So they have the target to make the China sky blue again, and this has an impact on the use of coal. But we don't go anywhere, honestly, in terms of global targets, if we do not have these super giants keep pushing in that direction.
Okay, thank you. No, that's very clear. But can I, Alessandro, I see a question about Italy. Can I bring you back from China, US, and back to our own country? So the question I see here is how feasible are those decarbonization goals, specifically with respect to the Italian situation, given the slowing deployment rates, deployment of new renewable capacity? So how, from your perspective in Paris, how do you see, how is Italy doing?
Well, I think, first of all, for Italy, those targets are as challenging as they are for the other countries, because it's not an easy task. What I would like to see is the glass half full, in the sense that Italy is doing well since years, I would say, in certain areas, or at least trying. One area that I think is important is the building sector, with the energy efficiency measures, the 110% bonus. This is a very intelligent way also to try to create jobs, which is something that the country desperately needs as other. Another important area, I believe, is the transport sector, where we have to do a lot in terms of trucks and so on, but at least there is a lot of, in terms of trying to electrify with charging station and so on, but at the same time to try to use CNG vehicles. We have an history coming from ENI, but also from SNAM in that direction. Renewables, we have to keep in mind also that Italy might not have the same potential that some other country has in terms of solar. Of course, we have a lot of irradiation, but we do not have so much space as other country. We do not have the offshore wind potential that there is, for instance, in North Europe. So at the same time, we have to consider this kind of thing. I believe one thing, honestly, that we have to be quite proud of is what our energy giant champions are doing. And in this, in all sectors. So you go from ENI to Enel, from Enel to Snam to Terna. Apologize, Elisa, Edison is I don't consider, I consider more as an eye in the country hosting me.
Yeah, it's not Italian anymore, unfortunately.
But yes, I mean, those targets are challenging. And the G20 presidency that we have this year in this particular moment could be an opportunity also to have a role in that dimension as well.
Okay. Well, Elisa, do you think we have time for one more question?
Yes, we have 3 minutes, so we can try to see if the connection help.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe this is a tricky one, Alessandro. I'm warning you. I give it a heads up. Because actually, when we're talking about, well, we can even think about Italy in that respect. So most of the largest enterprises, now you mentioned ENI, Enel, also in other countries, by and large, they have acknowledged the risk of climate change. They're under pressure from institutional investors, so they're taking relevant steps now, whether it's science-based targets or net zero targets, whatever, so through renewable procurement are in action. But the problem is, and I'm thinking of like a country like Italy, small, medium enterprises, no? Which, and you mentioned the pandemic, of course, the impact of the pandemic. So they seem more difficult to crack. So especially during an economic recession, how do you bring small, medium enterprises on board in the transition? I told you it would be tricky.
No, it's a tricky one because, of course, these companies do not have the means.
Yeah.
They have to look more at the daily basis and try to resist and so on. At the same time, I wouldn't underestimate the entrepreneurial spirit that this company can see in terms of the possibility connected to energy transition and to sustainability. Just to give an idea, I come from a region, Emilia-Romagna, that, for instance, hosts on the Adriatic coast, Ravenna, and a big engineering center that has been always very close to the oil and gas industry. And working 95% with abroad, with the companies and so on. You see many of these engineering companies trying to reconvert themselves, for instance, in components for the renewable industry. You are seeing, for instance, working from the offshore oil and gas in the offshore wind industry, and so on. You are seeing not later than 1 week ago, €1 billion investment of one of the largest electric vehicles in China, doing together with Americans in Emilia-Romagna and what is called the Motor Valley. It's just to say, in a nutshell, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not a point. I think there are many opportunities on this. I believe what is the know-how, so what you do as university, what we try to do as IA for government, but also as a occasion, is fundamental.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alessandro. I think, Elisa, we can stop here. And I would like to thank you twice, Alessandro. First, for being available, for being so clear with us and for sharing, giving your contribution. The second reason I'm thanking you for is actually because usually with the speaker, people tend to stay in their comfort zone and be specialized, but we kind of ask you questions spanning from any different topics, and usually that's not the case with which is as it's normal, no? Because we all specialize in something. But thanks to you, we were able to sort of move around the world in different countries and basically span across different technologies and different topics. So for that, I would thank you twice. So very much appreciated your intervention. And Lisa, back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alessandro. Thank you very much, Matteo. We are always very happy to spend some time together, especially when we have this kind of speaker. And I'm looking forward to the next energy talk. I hope that Alessandro will be again with us in the future, okay, because it's really a pleasure.
And I hope with everything working properly.
Okay, so the promise is that you will be back, because the network today was not very good, and so we have a pass for next time. Okay.
Yeah. And if there is any question, I mean, again, thanks very much for the invitation. I mean, appreciated, a pleasure. I hope to not get fined or arrested by French police. Try to go reach my place, but any question, other things or other occasion, I would be happy, if I can, to help or to provide any further question.
Thank you everybody for staying with us, and stay tuned for our next webinar. I hope that we can get back in person at Bocconi University, but as you can imagine, we wouldn't be able to have a speaker like Alessandro in Bocconi. So the webinar has some important advantages.
Indeed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Merci.
Bye.
Merci. Thanks again.